Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Poly Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and today we're going to be talking to a number of experts with a preview of a show that not everybody goes to called Microsoft Inspire. It's a partner primarily for partners in the industry, and it talks about the direction that Poly is going in. But I have people who know it and who attended a lot more than I do. So let me ask my guests to introduce themselves. We got a great panel for today, and then we'll get into the heart of what's coming up and what it's going to be like. So Brandon, let me start with you. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Rebby. I am the director of Microsoft Solutions for the Video BU. So I get to have the fun job of handling device certifications and all the communications with Microsoft to make sure that we're all playing together and really giving that good customer experience.
Thank you, Brandon. Joe, your turn. Give us
Awesome.
what you do at Poly.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a senior solution architect here at Poly, focused on Microsoft and their ecosystem, helping customers through their journey to Microsoft Teams and what hybrid work and meeting equity really looks like. So, yeah, excited to be here.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you joining us. And Kevin, you've been on before, and add to Brandon, but why don't you introduce yourself and let everybody know if they haven't seen you before?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to be here, David. My name's Kevin Keeler. I'm the co-founder of Enable UC, which is a boutique consulting firm that helps organizations get the most out of the Microsoft ecosystem. And then in an analysis and strategic role, we work with vendors to help them decode and strategize inside the Microsoft ecosystem, and then also do some analysis and content and go-to-market work as well.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. I really appreciate the conversation. So we all did the electronic version of Drawing Straws, and Joe, you were the one that was picked. Why don't you give us, a few minutes on what Microsoft Inspire is, what it's been, and what we can expect from it this year?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's generally two big conferences from Microsoft, and the one is Inspire, which is heavily partner focused. The other is Ignite, and Inspire is definitely about enabling partner capabilities. So a lot of partners bring their people to understand what Microsoft is doing across the ecosystem. So really showcasing the full ecosystem experience and how that will help their customers. So whether it's starting a new line of business, whether it's developing a new service that partner can do to help enable their customers in partnership with Microsoft, that's really where Microsoft focuses a lot of their attention. And every session really does have that core component of building a service or enabling that partner to deliver something to their customers. So it's a really cool, really exciting show to go to as a partner and find out how we're going to drive business for the next fiscal year.
And for old guys in the industry like me that think about, I'm a video collaboration guy or an AV guy or a telephony guy, the pandemic, amongst its other horrors, really brought out how we're now in a world where collaboration platforms are much more important than collaboration technologies. It's about how all of these things work together. I assume that's a fair point, especially around Teams and some of the other Office ecosystems, right?
Yeah, you'll see a lot of tie-ins between Teams and Viva and Loop and all of the ways that Microsoft is bringing these ecosystems together to help build their platform and build that ecosystem. So yeah, you'll see a lot of blending of technology.
And they've announced a few new ones this year, right? That we're getting used to. We're getting used to. I mean, the big one, I guess, is Front Row. You want to give us like a 2-second explanation of that and what we might expect to see them describe it as?
Yeah. So obviously, Front Row is relatively new. We're seeing Front Row really be a driver for that hybrid experience. And I know Brandon has talked a lot about it. Brandon, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I mean, Front Row it's a gallery view, or it's a different layout that we have that is more immersive for the people in the room. I being in the office, I have my laptop open and I'm watching the chat feed, and then I'm looking at the video and I'm trying to look at the content. Front Row kind of brings all that together so that your attention's on the meeting. We're working with Microsoft for some of the more advanced things that are coming down the road with like intelligent camera features that we talked about a little bit on LinkedIn last week, where we can pull feeds in and out. But like today, right? Like if you look at Front Row and what it really is, it's really simply a different layout in the room on the front of screen that allows us to get more information from the same place.
Yeah, it
The
almost looks
way,
like the traditional
Yeah.
telepresence of views, except now it's got the chat and the meetings and everything else.
the way
Yeah.
I like to describe it is you're kind of sitting across the table from the remote participants. And that's the idea, is that your focus is not split between video and content anymore. It's video plus content, plus you're just sitting across the table. And that's really how that drives that new experience. So yeah, definitely it really opens people's eyes when they see it from this perspective.
Well, and I think, and there's a couple of other subtle things about it that I think is important. I mean, the reason behind it is back to this experience equity, right? So as people are used to sitting at your laptop at home when we were all remote, we all had that chat feed. And then the other thing that I think that Front Row allows you to do is really like with Teams, you can, run in companion mode. And so even though you're in the room, whether you have, your laptop or just like a mobile, you can, send up those emojis and give people the, thumbs up and whatever. And I think people have become used to that when they're presenting. And so if most of the people are in the room, that also provides that capability as well. So I think, that's a tiny thing, but I think that, it's also an important thing that it brings, whether you're in the room or remote.
Yeah, it is. And I want to point that too, like the emojis and things, as a person who presents a lot to a large group of people that you get no feedback from typically during the presentation, right? Because their video's all off. There's like 200 people and you say something and you see like all the little hands clapping and the hearts. So like, it gives you that feeling of like, you know what? I'm nailing it. I'm doing well. I'm just going to keep going, and
This is making sense.
Yeah, right. Like you feel better about what you're doing, and your meeting goes a little better. So I'm a huge fan of the emojis and things because it really helps. Like I'm glad there's not a thumbs down or like a negative one, but for the most part, I think that's been great.
Well, who knows? With all the agile changes coming off of the platform, you may be getting a thumbs down sometime, either today or tomorrow. The last time I did Poly Weekly News Live, and we were talking, and you were on that one, Kevin. We were talking about how agile and quick the platforms are changing because there's an arms race going on right now. During that call, my Microsoft Teams updated. So I guess let's talk about that just for 1 second before we move on to the other things. We are living through an arms race. There are changes coming down the pike very, very fast. And Joe and Brandon, what do you hear from end users? Do you hear that end users really like how quickly the platform's getting new features and changes? Or are they starting to like wake up in one morning and see something they don't know and they start saying, hey, hold it stable for a little while?
I definitely think people are getting more used to it than they were a few years ago. If we had this pace of change 3, even 4 years ago, it would have been very hard for people to keep up. I think people have gotten used to their pace, and that every few weeks there's a new button or a new feature or a new drop-down menu item. People are used to that, and I think that experience has shifted now to where it's not as big of a frustration or pain point where Teams changes. But there's a lot of generations in the workplace that have different expectations, and I think it's a fine line.
Yep, and I think it depends on the change. Like the one where the share button went away, like it was a user interface change, and that user interface, like it's muscle memory to some people that use the conference room every day, and it was a big deal to them of like going like, oh wait, my button's gone, what happened? The iPhone is my example typically, right? Because our iPhones update all the time and our apps are always updating and they're doing all of these things. And if you're a power user, I don't read the release notes on every single app that gets updated on my phone overnight. It's virtually impossible. But the ones that I use constantly, like if the UI changes, I am not a happy person. So I think it's great that we have new features. And I think it's great that we have the ability to have new features. If you look at traditional video conferencing and telepresence, like it was SIP-based, like what new feature were we going to get? Like better quality, things like that. We have the ability with compute-based systems now to get more features, which is fantastic, right? And there's a certain camp of people that's looking for this certain thing, like, for breakout rooms. There's another camp of people that are looking for this certain thing, and they can deliver both of those at the same time. I think customers get grumpy whenever the UI changes. That's Brandon, the biggest one.
I will let you know that there are some people in this conversation that have their iPhone auto updates off. And I'm still old school of the camp that if it works, don't mess with it. Unless there's
Sure.
something that I need or something that I want, I'm not going to update. Then, when it falls out of operation, then I'll go in and see, all right, how many updates behind am I? And let's fix it.
Yeah,
So
and that's
Brandon,
a good point. That's a good point, though, because we get a lot of feedback from the tech person who's in charge, and that tech person is a tech person. They're not the end user. Polly has been going out and talking to customers on some of our new Empower product teams, and we want to get to the end users and not like the head of IT, because the head of IT and the people that work for them are very like power users, like, yeah, everything's fine. And then you get to that end user who's the person who uses the room. And they're like, well, it works, but I really wish it worked this way because this feature doesn't work for me because I use it in this other use case. So I think you bring up a good point, right? Like I assume as a tech power guy, like everybody updates their apps. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah. But I mean, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The people that are often pontificating on this, whether it's analysts that don't see a problem using, 5 or 6 different devices a day, or the IT people that a lot of IT departments still feel they know better than the end users, so they don't bother actually talking to them. But, I know Blair Pleasant and I did a training and user adoption study, and clearly users don't understand the features, and they realize that if they did understand the features better, they could be more productive. So, to circle back to about Inspire, really it's Microsoft explaining to the partners, there's been so many changes, like 300 plus changes to Teams, and really it's their chance to say, hey partners, here's a way that you can make money, whether it's delivering meeting equity. So they'll talk about their work trends index, and they'll talk about why meeting equity is important. And then they'll say, hey, partners, you can help these organizations. Or, Joe, you mentioned Viva. They're going to be, I'm sure, talking about the 2 new Viva modules, Viva Sales, which ties more into the CRM piece. But all of this surfaced through and, integrated with Teams. And then Viva Goals, which is, helps you with OKRs. So, I think there's so much richness in the Microsoft ecosystem and in the Microsoft products that this really is an opportunity at Inspire, not so much to be on features, but to really be on, you could build your business practice by delivering customer experience. And people say, wow, this is great. And then Microsoft has tons of information on their partner portal, but a lot of partners don't know it exists. And that's the problem. As the ecosystem gets so big, it's hard to even know all the pieces of it.
There's so much content, and there's so much material that you could spend a lifetime, consuming it all, right?
Right.
So Brandon, help us narrow down that large complexity. Tell us what some of the Poly stories are. Nothing new being announced, nothing NDA that we're revealing on the show today. So all of our lawyers can take a deep breath and not worry about that. But our wonderful brethren that help to keep us safe and honest. But let us know what some of the Poly perspectives are. What are some of the new products and new systems and new-ish devices that are going to be the highlights of what we're talking about, when we have discussions around Inspire and Inspire's topics.
Yeah, so I mean, from a Poly standpoint, like recently, we expanded our we kind of recategorized and redid our entire MTR and Windows portfolio. We're giving users 2 different computes to choose from, whether it be Dell or it be Lenovo. And recently we had our newest USB video bar, the R30, just went through certification and got officially certified about a week or so ago. And that fits into the small room category. So now we have a focus room, we have a small room, a medium room, a large room. Another piece that got certified is our P21, which is a personal all-in-one 1080p monitor that has speakers, microphone, camera built into it, and a lighting system on the side, which my wife says is fantastic because she can go up and down the side with the lights and make it look good, And
pause for a second on the P21. It's interesting. I don't think anybody is meh about the P21. They either absolutely love it or absolutely hate it. I don't see anybody in the middle of that, and that's really weird. I've never seen a product like that before.
Yeah, and it comes down to size, right? Like everybody's like, oh, it's too small. Or some people say, no, it's the perfect size because I'm going to ship these to people in their houses who may not have a dedicated home office. And when I ship it to them, they connect a cable. They don't put up the USB camera and make sure the laptop speakers are configured and then get the video monitor, like they just plug in a cable and they're up and running, right? I think it's a great solution. I think it's good for people at home, and I also think it's good for kind of hot desking as well. Just come into the office, plug in a cable, I'm ready to go.
Well, you can probably get better images, probably better sound, and plus or minus what you're doing, probably better cost base by buying individual poly components and setting them up. But the convenience of having the one device with everything on it with a single plugin for the home user is just it's awesome for a number of applications.
Well, and if I circle back to the training, study that we did, like I really see, I happen to be using a P21 right now, right? So if you like how this sounds, this is how you sound, right? And this is the video. And, but I really do think that, we need to make sure as IT pros or people making recommendations that we see the whole solution. And I think, there's lots of different people that want to focus on the piece parts. And the whole solution, I mean, it could be an all-in-one like the P21, but it also has to extend to the platform that you're using. And so certainly on Microsoft Inspire, they're only talking about Microsoft Teams. And really, I think that IT pros, they have to pick the devices and as well in the platform and make sure that they help the people understand how to use all of it together. And so when they're in their home office, maybe they're using the P15 or the P5 or the P21. And, they need to understand how to use that there. But then when they transition into the office, they're still going to be using Teams, but they're going to have different capabilities perhaps. And, maybe they use companion mode in one place or the other. But I really think whether it's an all-in-one device, it almost needs to expand another layer as an IT pro and make sure you're considering, training the people and keeping them up to speed on the device buttons and also the buttons in your software as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so then another thing going back to our MTR Windows platform, so we launched a camera control app. One of the things that's not been there that, if you have a customer who's switching from a traditional telepresence system, like controlling the camera was just something that you did. I could PTZ up and down and zoom in, zoom out. So in our cameras, we have features like group framing, people framing, speaker framing. We have all these different modes that the camera can be in, but in a Teams call, we had really no way to do that. So we have an application that utilizes the MTR room controls. You just hit the bottom right corner, it pops up, and I can turn it to group framing, or I can say people framing, speaker tracking, things like that. It's just an easier, it's a user experience. And it's not something we sell, which is like, here's our app, it works with our cameras, put it on your MTR, make your experience better.
Which goes well with one of the big core categories of sessions at Inspire is the focus on enterprise clients, the digital workplace. It really is a focus on employee first, a human-centric approach. And, ideally the technology just gets out of their way and just produces the experience for that meeting, whether you need speaker tracking or group framing, whatever mode makes the most sense, whether it's front row or a standard 2-screen meeting layout, right? But thinking about that human-centric approach first, and then building the technology to enable that, I think it's going to be one group of sessions that you'll see at Ignite that really focuses on how that technology enables that. So yeah, and Poly also has a session at Ignite called "It's not hybrid work, it's work." So we're actually getting rid of that word hybrid finally, which I can't say I'm sad to see go, and just talking about work, right? And that's where we're headed, right? And so it's it's really that new focus now, getting back to the office, being productive, having fun, being collaborative, and it's not hybrid work, it's just work.
Well, it's okay if we want to drop the label hybrid, although I'm looking at my camera outside. I just bought a hybrid, so I thought that was actually really a cool thing. But the idea of our meetings being in a room is what's changed. When we're working, we can work from anywhere. When we meet, the meeting isn't taking place in conference room 304 or whatever we've named the conference room. The meeting's in the cloud. And that's one of the key differentiators in how we're changing and all this technology with Microsoft's platform and with the technology that we provide, where it's really changing, because you can join it from anywhere. and just have that optimal experience from wherever you are. It's no longer a situation where the people in the room are running the meeting and the people that are connecting remotely are second-class citizens. It's almost completely reversed. So that's really one of the bigger changes, is that the meeting is now taking place in the cloud. And Teams, when Teams came out, and there's some competing platforms for it and after it as well, I really thought it was a solution looking for a problem. But when COVID came along, boy, did we give it the problem. The value of having a single place in the cloud to collaborate and do all of your work, regardless of what it is, has really, I think, saved productivity for knowledge workers for the last couple of years. So I'm sure that's some of the topics that are going to be coming up, and some of the data that's going on through all of that.
Well, yeah. Obviously, Microsoft is going to talk about their big themes about cloud, because there's still organizations that are, Microsoft wants you to move more workloads to the cloud, their Azure cloud, and they're going to talk about AI, which is, Joe, I think you mentioned it, or with some of the framing uses, whether it's edge AI in the devices, or the cloud empowers AI as well. And then, Microsoft will, of course, which I think is great, they're going to talk about sustainability and accessibility as well, I'm sure, as broad topics that, I think is they're being a good corporate citizen in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah, and the breadth of solutions that Microsoft has, we get stuck on our side of the house, like in Teams, of this is an application used for audio and video, and really don't look at like holistically everything that it contains. Like, it makes your job so much easier. It's like, oh, you need that file? Yeah, click, 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 here you go. It's there, right? And then when you look at the partners that need to make that happen, right? I have the Azure partners, I have the Teams app partners, I have the application partners. There's all of these different partners that go into this umbrella of what is Microsoft to feed all of those components, which is why this conference is so great, because it covers all of that. Like, I can go in and watch a session on how the new Azure Hyper-V virtualization is going to work, which has really nothing to do with what I'm doing on the video side, but it helps tell that story of all the puzzle pieces that put Teams together that made our work and life easier.
Right.
Okay, no, that's really awesome. let me throw I'm not meant to sandbag Brandon and Joe, but just I saw online, I think it was on LinkedIn about a week or so ago, that we had somebody at least experimentally daisy chaining E70 cameras. Are we have we seen any of that happen right now, where there's more than one E70 camera hooked up to endpoints? Is that, I mean, we know we're going to go in that direction at some point in the future, but have you seen experiments with it?
Yeah, so on the MTR side of the house, like, we can hook two E70s up to one of our MTR devices. You can have one in the front, one in the back, and you can switch between those two cameras if you want to. And, our group framing and things like that work with those two different devices because Microsoft supports it. Right now, we don't have that on the MTR side of the house, where we're daisy chaining or having more than two.
Yep.
I think that's something. Go ahead, Joe.
Microsoft is definitely innovating in and adding more capabilities to Teams, as we'll see both from a client perspective, so Teams on your phone and your desktop, and how we use Teams every day, and how we consume those meetings, and what that video looks like when it gets to us on the remote side. All of that is going to be changing, whether it's dynamically scaling the size of the video from the room to see it bigger, composite feed to see the individual tiles of the people in the room. All of those things are really going to help improve that experience from on that remote side. Yeah.
And the goal from Poly ultimately is to use more than one camera in the same space to provide the best shot of the person who is presenting, speaking, whatever it may be at the time, to the remote side. Whether that's one camera we can do it with, or two cameras, or three cameras, or whatever that is. Like, internally, those are the goals of development for us as a company, is to give the best possible experience. And that experience could take two cameras, it could take three.
And it's also important for us to.
Not every conference room looks the same, right?
Yeah.
And it's also important for us to point out that from a positioning standpoint, the goal is for meeting participants who are experts in their field, whether they're great accountants or great doctors or great researchers or whatever it is, to walk into the meeting either at home or in the conference room and only have to focus on their area of expertise. They shouldn't have to be experts in what we do, That's what should be in the technology. They shouldn't have to aim cameras. They shouldn't have to adjust sound. They shouldn't have to start the meeting. All the technology that we provide to a certain extent now is, and to a greater extent is getting there, is actually, we should provide that smart so they don't have to become those experts. And Kevin, this is a conversation that I know we had recently online, on one of our Twitter chats, going back a few weeks, which is this concept of how important is training and adoption. And I know that's something that you're passionate about, and I don't think it's the same. While I agree with you how much it has been needed and how much it is needed now, I think the focus on manufacturers such as Poly and platforms such as Microsoft and the rest of the people in the industry is to do just what I explained before, is to make the products so easy to use and so smart that you don't have to learn to use them. You only have to be experts in what you do. And having said that, though, you still have this inertia issue. You still have the fact that people are not familiar with what it can do, and
Right.
you have to give them some sort of easy road into it. So give me your perspective on adoption and where you think it is now and where it's going.
Well, I think we're seeing, to your point, I think we're seeing AI. So, for example, there's been great advances in AI around noise cancellation, and certainly Poly's done a bunch of stuff on the devices. The platforms have done stuff, and on good days they work together, and that's important. And I think we're seeing that as well around the video as well, like automatic brightness controls and some the background blurring or people identification, people counting, all of these kinds of things. So that type of thing just works, and it makes it easy for people. But I do think that we talked about teams being more than just the meeting. The meeting can be an important point, and then there's some asynchronous collaboration that happens, which may or may not include video. And then we come back, and so I think helping organizations understand the full breadth of the capability is the purpose of the training, because you don't even, if most people don't get all excited and follow every new feature in the Office 365 roadmap like maybe we do. And so when a new feature comes out, they're not going to go and click on every dropdown to say, hey, is there a new option? Therefore, the most wonderful capability, like, so for example, the camera control, if you don't know to access it, you may never use that additional feature that could make your interaction better. So I think really increasingly the role of training is to help generate awareness around that these features exist. So then if somebody says, hey, for my line of business, that could make my day better, me productive, then they could go and ask the follow-up questions. And I think we still have to do a lot there. And back to that study, 3/4 of the people said, I think I don't understand my UC platform enough to get full productivity out of it. And with all these new features coming out, like the multi-stream and the auto framing, I hope people buy these devices, but then I hope they actually educate people that they're available and they can answer whatever questions people have.
Joe and Brandon, go ahead. That's what I was going to ask you.
From the, I'm a heavy IT industry person my entire life. And I think, even when I was doing server administration and user admin, like we were always looking for a single point of work. How can I give a person a canvas that they can work out of to get everything done that they need? With Teams, we're really close to that because of all the outside application integrations and the Office 365 integration. And now I have audio, and now I have video, and now I have phone. All of these things come into it. And I think kind of going back to what you said, the training piece, we haven't caught up with like, hey, we gave it to you. And everybody's like, I don't really know how to do that. I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean there's an app button? I don't know how to do that. And it's really focusing on specific work that needs to be done for a specific group of people and training them and saying, yep, there's all these other things you can do, but like for you to get your job done, here's what it is, and really focusing on getting those people what they need so they can have that aha moment of, wow, this actually works really well. Like my life is so much better because you did this. Thank you, IT. And I think everybody wants to have that thank you, IT at some point in their life. It really has, like my wife worked for an insurance company for 12 years, 13 years, and she was on the old, like pull up the green screens and all the stuff off the mainframe. And they switched to a Teams environment overnight. And the training she got was a link to click on that says, go to this and watch these videos. And she's like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, luckily you have a person here who knows how this works. But then going through that and explaining to her, here's where you go to get your documents. Here's where you go to get your applications. It was an uphill thing.
Yeah.
I come from a deep training background, also in IT for 20 years. And I think what I've seen recently is that people first and foremost need a why, right? They need to know why this is important to them. What is it going to change for them? You know, I see on the roadmap they're adding, for example, like call control through Bluetooth headsets and speakerphones. So little things like that where the same buttons that you had forever get new functionality, right? And those types of things. And I also think that if we treat training and not necessarily for the lowest common denominator, but treat everybody as if they need some form of accessibility to the platform, to the functions and features that we're talking about, and not just, treat, certain people that way, but treat everybody where we're bringing them in, we're inclusive of all, and bringing the technology to them, giving them a why as to what it's going to change for them. Like Kevin, like you said, really talking holistically about the life cycle of that meeting, because it's not just while you're sitting there in the room having a meeting and then you leave and you forget everything you just talked about. There's stuff that happens before, there's stuff that happens during, there's lots of things that follow up after, and there's more meetings to come, and it's a process. And so all of the technology is there to enable that. That's where Microsoft's full ecosystem really comes to bear. And that's, again, tying it all back, is where they heavily focus at Inspire to really leverage their full ecosystem. So
terrific. So, gentlemen, you will all be attending Inspire. It's all fully digital. It's remote. It's not in person this year. Can I ask you to come back on the show in a couple of weeks after you've attended, and let's go back through it and figure out what we've learned and what was brought up, if that's okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So let's go around the horn one more time. Kevin, if somebody wants to find out more about what you do or wants to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so they can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Keeler, and as while they're there, I have a new Taming Teams newsletter that they can subscribe to, because that's my part of, kind of trying to surface some of these great features in Teams that maybe you're not aware of.
Kevin, thank you very much. Joe, same question to you. How can somebody find out more about what you do, more about Poly, and reach out to you?
Yeah, great. So first of all, thanks for tuning in. Joe Delecky, Senior Solution Architect here at Poly, representing Western US and South America, Latin America. And if you can follow me on LinkedIn, it's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm very active there, posting updates and content there. But yeah, definitely the easiest way to reach me.
Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate you being on. Brandon, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, more information about Poly, poly.com, easiest place to go and find out more information about our solutions and our products. For me specifically, LinkedIn's probably the best place to go. I have the Twitter feeds and all of those, but I honestly just don't follow them. LinkedIn is probably the best place to get to me. It's Brandon Revy.
Brandon, Joe, Kevin, thank you both, all three of you, very much for being on the show and helping giving us a preview of Microsoft Inspire and agreeing to come back on and tell us more about it when it's over. So that's it for this week's show. I'm David Danto. For next week's show, I will be joined by my colleagues Caitlin Press and Tony I to talk about and demo and give you guys some examples of Poly's work from home solutions. I'm going to be, again, I'm honored this year again to be authoring and moderating the CEDIA Expo Work from Home Pavilion with all the work from home education with the IMCCA. And Tony and Caitlin will be joining me to talk about how Poly has solutions in that area and why they're the best on the planet. For all of my colleagues at Poly and my three guests here today, thanks very much for watching, and we will see you on next week's show.